by a man with a machete outside a nightclub in...
Was assaulted outside a Toorak nightclub.
Paran nightclub drive-by shooting.
My name's Danny Rance and I've worked in the music and entertainment industry for over 2 decades. Come with me as I pull back the curtain on Australia's craziest and wildest nightclub precincts in the Clubland Chronicles. That was the first night time I got pepper sprayed. I got fired and his head butted him. I dropped the dude on the spot and knocked him out. There was 2 stabbings. There was people getting bottled. There was people getting pushed over the balcony. Unfortunately, this area has always been a pretty bad spot for suicide. Welcome to Clubland Chronicles number 3. Tonight we are walking down Russell Street and all the little chutes that shoot off it. So there's a bunch of clubs along Russell Street, but there was also a bunch of clubs that ran off Russell Street, off Lonsdale and down little alleyways and whatnot. At one point in sort of 2007 to 2013, this was busier than King Street. Russell Street was fucking packed every Saturday. It used to combine onto Burke Street, which was also packed. So the top part of Burke Street, which I talked about in my last episode, was also flat out busy and packed all the time. So they used to both feed off one another, but it was easily busier than King Street. It was the nightclub precinct for a bit for Melbournians. Currently on the corner of Russell and Burke, there used to be a Hungry Jack's there, and they used to stay open super late, so everyone would get blind and go down there and eat. If they ate, not many people did eat. Back in those times, people weren't really eating. One time I got slapped for no fucking reason there from this dude, but that's another story in itself, which I'm not going to go into. And I didn't react, and I don't think I did because I was on something that made you love, not hate. And I don't think he was on the same thing that I was. So the first venue, which says Skylounge now, which I don't ever remember being called Skylounge, was called Simba, and before that was called Altitude. So this was the venue that was around for a while. It was a rave club before it was Simba, and then for a while it was a Melbourne bounce club. It never really was an institution. It was busy, like no doubt it got packed, but it was never really an institution in our scene. It was basically like an overflow venue, so if you couldn't get into anywhere else, you used to go here. It really dominated for a minute. There was a guy called Wes Petit and a DJ called Heath Bernardo who were running it, and it used to be packed, and they made a buckload of cash. But unfortunate for them, they had some drama. So down this alleyway here, there was 2 stabbings in a period of about, I reckon, 3 weeks. One of the guys I actually knew who was the stabber, and he went to jail for a little bit. I think he did like 1.5 or 2 years from it. He was a pretty nice kid. It was kind of out of character for him to have done that, but he's now no longer with us, unfortunately. But I don't really know why he did it or what actually happened. So this was the door. We used to line up here, and that was where you get into for Simba or Altitude. And there'd be a lot of shufflers up there back in the day, but when I was involved in going there, it was more sort of Melbourne bound sort of style stuff. Anyway, so there was 2 stabbings in a row here, and then it got the reputation where people started calling it Stab Bar instead of Simba, and pretty quickly they lost all their audience and they couldn't really gain it back. And to be honest, that was the end of that chapter for this club in my history. So it sort of died off, and I've never really heard or seen it come back. We'll see how far we can get up. That was the smoking area up there. It's all smashed up now. Used to be able to smoke and like look down onto Russell Street. I'd say it's still a bar in there, no doubt. But it was called Eden for a bit too. I'd say it's still a bar inside it, but it might have a license, it might not have a license. I doubt it, but it's definitely not running as a club, and it hasn't for a very, very long time. Across the road, we have another venue, sort of like the Metro, very, very iconic, super, super fucking famous venue, Billboard, aka 170 Russell. They had Taylor Swift play there at one point. I used to run Saturdays there. It was my first club, the one that I talked about in one of my TikToks that I worked at. So the story goes, I got fired for my first job, and it was my first real club job, by the Udorovics. Effectively, there was a guy called Mark Udorovich, who's basically one of the pioneer of Melbourne nightclubs, who owned Billboard, and his son Luke Udorovich was running the Saturday, and I worked for him. I've been in a mate's grand final all day, drinking beers as you do at that age, and we came into Saturday night pretty fucking heated and pretty pissed. So we were up the top in like the VIP area, and Luke Udorovich, the owner's son, the boss, he was having drinks with his friends, and I was having drinks with my friends, about 40 of us. So we were talking, Luke, myself, his best friend, and my best friend, and one of those guys accidentally spilled a drink on the boss's best friend's lap. So it was all good, it was all chill. So he was like, "I'll go get your napkin, I'll put it onto your lap, rah, rah, rah." So he went over there and he got a napkin. As he walked over, one of the guys that I was with, he sort of had tattoos on his face and neck and whatnot. He was a bit of a rough looking character, great dude. Unfortunately, also not with us. One of my best friends, he passed away when I was on my honeymoon, a guy called Aposta. One of the biggest legends I've ever met. He's now passed away, but this is a part of his story. He was standing there, and one of the other guys from the other group, who was a pretty rough dude, I won't say his name, he turned around and he sort of misread the situation. So he's walked up to my mate and had a crack at him, and his head butted him. So then then it's kicked off, and there was about 20 or 30 of us, and it was an all-in brawl. There was about 8 of them, but then all the guards sort of came to their aid to help them, and it was this thing was fucking humongous. There was dudes getting pushed over the bar, there was people getting bottled, there was people getting pushed over the balcony. I got pulled out the back by one of the guards. Me and him were like hockey style, punching on at the back, and then eventually the police got called because it went for like 15 minutes, and everyone sort of started to move on, and it bled out to the front of where that is at the front of the car park, and it was all over. And myself and the boss, Luke, who's still a good friend of mine, again, I keep saying these, but all my stories start this way, we're at the front yelling at one another, and he was saying, "You're never going to fucking work in this industry again, you're never going to fucking work here, I can't believe you did this." And because I was arrogant and I was full of ego at the time, I was saying, "I don't even want to work in this fucking joint, fuck you." So we're screaming, my shirt's ripped, I'm covered in blood, they're all covered in blood, and then, don't know how, whatever happened, but I remember that it kind of calmed down, and we gave the two aggressors an opportunity to sort of shake hands, because that was a really common thing back then. So back then, if someone punched on, you give them opportunity to shake hands, and if they shook hands, you'd actually let them both back into the club, and it was sort of on them not to fight again. If they did, they'd get banned. So on this night, they gave them that opportunity, and they sort of stood next to each other, and it heated back up again, and my mate Apostle, the one who passed away, headbutted this dude, and I remember that this guy with like, the other bloke had been opened up, his nose was completely splattered across his face, and I remember him actually looking up and giving credit to my mate Apostle, and he was like, "Fucking good headbutt, bro." So anyway, that broke off, the cops came, they ended up chasing my mate Apostle and another one of my friends, Spencer, and we all bailed all over the joint. So we all bailed all over the city, all over here, all over there, and we met up around the corner. We sort of debriefed and talked shit about what happened and had a laugh about it, as you did back then, and then we moved on. And then on the Tuesday, I had to come face the music by myself. So it was just me, my boss, and the owner, and I basically had to explain what and why I'd done that and why I should keep my job. But as you can imagine, I had not many legs to stand on, so I got fired. And at that point, I thought it was the end of my career. And that's funnily enough when I went up to Crover to go ask if I could run the Saturday, because I had nothing else and I had nothing to lose. So I decided it was time to go on my own. If I was going to act like a fuckhead, I might as well act like a fuckhead on my own and not have a boss. Another pretty grim story was I actually got here after it happened, but basically a guy had fallen off the top of this roof, bang, straight down there in front of those glass door windows. And they just closed it off, and basically they cleaned it up and the crime scene and whatnot, and moved it on. And the guy didn't kill himself, he was drunk and he accidentally stumbled. Back then there wasn't a barrier on the top level, and he stumbled and lost his footing and fell off the top of the roof of the car park. They cleaned it up, and then the show went on. They were using the back door until that was finished, and then once that happened, the show went on. Actually, funnily enough, I ran an event there 2 years ago, and not even 2 years ago, last September, and there was a terrorist guy that drove through Burke Street, and he hit a tram or ran into someone or something like that. You can look it up in the paper, and it happened in September. It was probably like September 9th last year, and this guy was insane. Again, it was a terrorist attack, but it wasn't a religious-based thing. But he was a nutbag. We had sold like 1,000 tickets, and it was like midnight, and there was fuck all people there. And the reason why there was fuck all people there was because no one could get in the city because they completely closed the doors down. So that was a bit of a hindrance, but then eventually they opened it back up, and the show went on. But the guys that own Lucky Entertainment, which is one of the biggest entertainment companies in Australia, that is Luka Dorovich. So Luka Dorovich, I talk about for their family who know and are involved in their sort of like club royalty. That's him. So he owns Lucky Entertainment, and their office is just up there. It's like overlooks the city. It's fucking huge and it's amazing. And I still do a lot of work with those guys. So that's the billboard. That's BJ, one of my old mates. It goes down to a level, and it's like super, not underground, but like soundproof. So you can't even hear a thing. There's a full concert under there. 1,000 people, he just told me. It's a Tuesday night, and you can't hear fuck all. So it's one of the best venues in regards to that, because it's got no hotels around it, and it's got a car park above it, and basically it's completely soundproof. So it's going to be around forever, has been around forever, and it's not going to have the same consequence that other people have because of the dramas with sort of like people moving in and hotels and whatnot, because it's effectively buried under the ground. There it is, billboard. That's the back entry. If you're ever trying to like stoke an artist, or stalk an artist I should say, that's where you want to hang around, right in that corner, because that's where they all go in and out. You go down there into the green room and whatnot. This alley here is called Coverlid Place, so it's just off Burke Street. Down there is Ballers now, but it used to be called Roxanne Parlour. Unfortunately, this area has always been a pretty bad spot for suicide, because you can easily get access to the roof up there and people would jump down. I have had the unfortunate experience to be able to witness that, and it was pretty fucked up, but let's move on from that story because it's pretty depressing. So I used to run my first ever biggest event here at a venue called Roxanne Parlour, and it was called Fornicated My Night. That's a smokers, the billboard. It was called Fornicated, and I was running it myself, completely myself, and I was doing 1,500 people every 6 weeks. So you come up here and people would line up all the way down here, all the way down the street, and I was making bulk cash. So I was like 22, 23, I was making like $25,000 myself, and I was spending it as quick as I was making it. I came from a pretty rough background, which I've talked about before, so I had no idea how to save or how to buy houses or reinvest in. I wish I did, because I wasted that money like it was free. I bought a boat that seized because I didn't wash it. I bought fucking cars. I used to shout mates dinners. I used to go on holidays all the time. Don't regret it. It was mad times, but at the same time, if I kept a tenth of that money, I would have been a lot further in life, a lot quicker. But you live and you learn, right? So that venue there, you go through here, and there's like a lift here, and that lift takes you up to the top. So the top 2 levels there is actually Roxanne Parlour. And that's where we used to do it. So I used to run the event there for ages, and then down the track they actually ripped it out. So they ripped all the inside out, and that made me even love it more. So I came back and asked the owner, like, hey, you still got the license in there? And they said yes. So we started running it when they had no lift. The lift was out of operation, and we would use this door, and we'd make people walk up all those levels there. And we did this thing called Debbie Dar's Abandoned Warehouse Parties, and it was a gutted venue 2 stories up with no smoking area, and we just bump a sound system in, and we'd run these fucking like really industrial warehousey type raves in the top 2 levels of that story there, because it still had its license in there. So that was pretty cool, and we ran that until it got bought by other investors, and they turned into something else, turned into something else, turned into something else, and now it's Paws. Another venue that I have a lot of history with, and I fucking loved it, and the guys that run it, I still talk to them. They're a guy called Alex Dobbin, another guy called Dan, and they were legends. They were real young guys. They ran the venue, and they loved me because I used to come in every 6 weeks. I don't think they understood what we did or what music I was doing, but they didn't give a fuck because we did good bars, and because a lot of people were on the ecstasy, there wasn't a lot of drama and trouble. One time though, we did have a massive brawl here. It was right here, and I remember the guys getting kicked out of here, and they started using these bollards, not these exact bollards, but bollards like that, and they started smacking the fuck out of the guards with the bollards. So the police ran down, so I don't know if they got called or they just saw it, and they ran down the alleyway here, and then they started to spray these guys. So we had about 600 or 700 people in the alleyway, including myself, which were further down. The melee had kind of broken all the way through this whole area, and they were going fucking nuts at each other. So the coppers came in, and they were not being easy on the spray. They were like, just spraying the fuck out of everybody. And because it's an alleyway, the pepper spray had nowhere to escape. So it just kind of backdraft back down here, and there would have been 150, 200 people all on the ground going and vomiting and shit, including myself. So that was the first and only time I got pepper spray, was by default because of a brawl at this venue at a night I did. Relatively interesting story. Many a dart had in this fucking seedy house alleyway. The boys that own this venue have done a wicked job. They actually bought it off Mark Udovich. Luke Udovich still owns it, but the other boys too. It's open 7 days a week. It's got to be one of the busiest venues in Melbourne right now. Easily the most versatile, but it just doesn't stop. It's full of uni nights, club nights, band nights. As I said before, I think Taylor Swift actually played there years ago. So some massive fucking artists that played there. Very, very cool things. When you walk out here, you're on Little Chinatown. So this is Little Burke Street. Just up here, from memory, we'll see if it's still there, was a place called Euro something. I can't remember, I have to find it. Called Euro House or Euro Bin or Euro something. They used to have Tuesdays there that used to pump. They used to be really, really busy. It was a cool, eclectic bar. So you walk in there, 3 levels, and there's sort of like this indoor-outdoor area in the middle of it. But the guy that owned it was a Serbian dude, and they had like this Balkan Serbian bar, like war-themed bar down the bottom at one point. That guy there, his name was Renee. He was a very interesting cat, but unfortunately he's passed away. Much like most hospitality people, he was very eccentric, very huge and large character who loved to fucking drink. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was an interesting cat nonetheless. Back on Russell Street, but we're walking upwards, so we're going towards Little Lonsdale Street. There's a famous place in the corner called Stalactites. If you've been clubbing on this area before, you've no doubt eaten there. It's a 24-hour or close on 24-hour souvlaki bar that makes mad fucking feeds. Still to this day, when I go to a festival, I go out, I'll come here at like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, chow down on a mad meat platter with my mates, and then drive home. It's a Melbourne institution. It's just as important as all the clubs and stuff. It's been there for a long, long time, as long as I can remember. And if you haven't been there, get down and try it out. Stalactites, just on the corner there. It's fucking mad. That's Stalactites, baby. Come here at like midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. This joint is absolutely pumping. There's a line all the way out here. People trying to get servos or sit down. You can have a full sit-down meal. All right, so here you got 2 venues. So this venue here was TFU at one point, 2 floors up, and it was also Wawa. And this venue over here was Escobar. So that's been sold now. The doors used to enter through were just over here. So you'd walk up through this part, these doors here, and that was Escobar. It was there forever. It never really proper popped off. It had like a bit of a heyday. TFU owned it for a little bit, and that was sort of the final resting place at TFU. Unfortunately, it got shut down, and a bunch of guys that were involved in it went to prison. A bunch of wild stories that no doubt I'll tell over time happened towards the end of that kind of reign of TFU. As I said before, it was very political, and it was wild stories, wild times, and it changed owners a lot. It all kind of ended like a great fucking tragedy every single time. So that was the final resting place of TFU. It was also Lab 22, so Lab 22 was a super important part of the Melbourne sort of music scene. Run by a guy called Roger Abood, who's like a super famous fucking promoter who's been working in the industry for like 30-40 years. He's a lot of big careers that come from him. Actually, Joel Fletcher, Will Sparks, and a bunch of other guys that were in the underground like Callus and whatnot, CBD, had come from him. So anyway, this venue shut down because the safety issues became too big. So basically when I talked about how, oh there you go, there's actually says Escobar there. Fuck, a reminisce of the past. So basically the top floor started to collapse in, so they had to close it so they could only use the bottom level. And so once they could only use the bottom level, it was too hard to pay the rent and whatnot, and it became basically a venue that you can't use. So a friend of mine actually bought this. They've been sitting on the lease for like 3 or 4 years. They may have sold it because it says it's sold now, but I know they were thinking about opening it up. But as you can see there, it says 7 a.m. liquor license. It's a rare one. It's a rare one these days. Back when I was partying, that was fucking early. Like if your venue was closing at 7 a.m, you weren't doing too well. So here people would jump, stomp, slap, clap, fucking smash walls, exactly like what I said. I remember there being signs there that would literally say, don't smack the walls. And the floor literally started to cave in, so they couldn't use it anymore. So that actually fucked the venue, because that's how off the joint used to go with that style of music, that the floor started to actually cave in. So here is Waratah Place. So this is one of my favourite streets and favourite clubs that I ever was involved in when I was younger. So down this alleyway here was when I told you about how I sort of liked house music, and then I moved across to a more harder style where I found Electro was this venue here. And you used to walk in this joint here and there'd be like a line up there, and those 2 levels there were 2 floors up. So as you can see, there's 2 floors up, hence why it was called that. Pretty creative, right? This was a super exclusive club, and you couldn't get a guest list. You couldn't even get a birthday list. You basically had to know the bouncers. So you used to come here and you would line up, and they would just knock back everybody because they only had space for like 400 people, and you basically had to be a member to get in. It was a unique place because it was very much the end of the old days, in my opinion, when I was coming here. So you could walk in and you could buy drugs off security. It was pretty open. Everyone knew what everyone was up to. The management knew what was going on. The DJs knew what was going on. Punters knew what was going on. You just come here to have a good time. Everyone was drinking. There wasn't a lot of trouble at the beginning of it. But basically, it was the end of the old days. It was back when you used to see that kind of corruption or internal corruption still happening. But as time went on and now, you don't see any of that sort of shit. Clubs are running like Telstra shops these days. Even standing there, I'm like, fuck, man, I had the best memories here. Just absolutely off my partying up there till early hours of the morning. Listening to Electro, which I fucking loved. Without this club, I never would have started my career, because this was the beginning and the pioneering place that made me love this industry so much and want to work in it properly. And the guys that worked behind it took me under their wing. So a guy called Nick Corvo, Jason Colbeck and whatnot, they were the first guys to really sort of take me under their wing early days and let me run events with them and make money from it. And they were the ones that didn't really necessarily teach me what to do, but they showed me the lifestyle of what it felt like to be a promoter, be able to walk in with a bunch of crew, walk straight through the doors, make money off tickets, not pay for drinks, feel exclusively, and be able to run amok and do whatever the fuck I wanted without basically any repercussion. But I did get repercussion. In that last video, Clubland Chronicles, when I talked about Moody, the guy from Crover who owned this joint, how he used to have it out for me when I used to come here, well, he slapped me right here. So I was sitting right there on a crate just like that when I got up, and I thought I wanted to go back in because I was being sin binned, which is something that used to happen to me a lot through old mate Jason Colbeck. And I pinched him on the nipple and he open hand fucking slapped me like that. And he also threw me down the stairs just down here. Fucking good times. I don't really know why it closed. I know there was a lot of dramas again. Shit started to get heavy. The wrong sort of people were hanging around. As I said, obviously drugs were pretty fluid and free there. You weren't getting kicked out for having them or doing them. So I dare say that attracted the wrong people. And I know rumours, but I don't want to speculate, but the guys ended up leaving there and going down to King Street in a club that I talked about in Clubland Chronicles called Rare. It was a steak joint called Rare Now that I fucking hated. But then they moved to Burke Street, which they stayed for like 7 or 8 years. But that was the original 2 floors up. So the original TFU was where Wawa was. So I can't carry on about just TFU land, it was also the place of Wawa. So Wawa was a massive part of a lot of people's careers. I know Joel Fletcher played his first gig there. Callis was involved with it. Lab 22 with their early days. They had a fallout with the owner Steve, and then Steve continued it. It was an institution. It really helped blow that Melbourne sound music up across rural Victoria because he started up a podcast. I reckon he was the first person ever to do a podcast, but a podcast was effectively like a fucking SoundCloud back then. And that went viral, and it sort of helped bring the sound all over the place. So Steve had a massive part in doing that, and Steve ran Wawa for like fucking 7, 8, maybe 9 years, so a really, really long time, and he killed it there. He did a really, really good job. So I can't talk about Waratah Place, even though I didn't go there a lot because I was working at other competing nightclubs. Yeah, maybe. Even though I didn't go there a lot because I was working at competing clubs, I can't talk about Melbourne without talking about Wawa. I don't have many stories about it myself. I only ever ran one event there, I think. It was like one long weekend. It was an event called I Love Lucy, but I couldn't do it because when that juice epidemic, I couldn't continue the brand because when that juice epidemic kicked off, people were calling juice Lucy. It was like a code name. So effectively my event, that was a massive one. We used to do fucking thousands of people, turned into I Love Juice GHB. So I had to cancel that event. And I think the last ever one was at Wawa, but that was the only event I ever ran there. The walk around doing this is fucking weird because you get two types of people. You get people who are like, want to be friendly and say hello and ask what you're up to. You get people who recognize you and they want to say hello and take a photo with you. And then you get these other people that are basically being fuckheads to you. So they yell at you and they mock you, so it's relatively awkward. So don't be a mocker. I'm trying to make something that's entertaining for people, and I just get all these cunts fucking ragging me all the time. So around here somewhere is another club called Key Club, which has been around for a long, long time. Before my time, I remember there was these dudes that I went to high school with that wanted to beat the fuck out of me that worked the door because we used to give them a rough time when I was growing up. So I didn't come here often when it was here. One story I do have is of a famous security guard called Clay Matagi. He was here when Nelly was here, so Nelly was at the night or hosting the night or whatever. And he wasn't warned that people were allowed to do drugs here on the night. So someone in his team was doing a fat line of Charles. And Clay saw it and he went over there and told him off. And one of the big guards there, who was fucking probably 3 times his size, had basically told him to fuck off. And Clay's not the kind of guy that you tell to fuck off. So Clay basically dropped the dude on the spot and knocked him out. And that was Nelly's security guard. And it made the paper that he had knocked him out at the club. So that's a relatively famous story from there. Other than that, it's had a very R&B, rich culture history for a long time since. So the guy called Peter Oliver did own it for a long, long time, and it was a venue called Yo-Yo. So Yo-Yo also had rich R&B roots throughout of all of Melbourne. So most people that were involved in a lot of the R&B scene, b-boying, in that sort of hip-hop community, somehow cut teeth or had a lot to do with Yo-Yo or Key Club. So I couldn't finish the tour without saying it. I don't know where the fuck it is. I know it's here somewhere. So if you do know it, you'll know it better than I do. That's the only story I've got of it, but that's the end of that tour. So that's just off Lonsdale Street on the opposite side. So even though this was fucking 100 metres from where I used to hang out for many, many years, I never went there, and I didn't know a lot of people that did either. So it shows you how you can be so close but not know any stories or any heritage of, or know little stories or little heritage of a place that was just around the corner, just because it was different scenes. So there's probably plenty of places that I'm not bringing up or not talking about because I didn't know about them. Occupied by different people, different scenes, different subcultures, and they have their own stories, they have their own lineage to talk about, but I can't talk on it because I wasn't a part of it. I didn't know those stories. I just actually finished the wrap up, but I'm going to put this somewhere else near the billboard story. So I'm walking back to my car, but I remembered a crazy story. So the owner, the guy I was talking about, Mark Udorovic, he was at the front one time, and he's been out the front. He's spent more hours than any fucking human in our industry at the front of a nightclub. Standing at the front of a club one night, and he, full of AJs, like army dudes, got knocked back. And they took it upon themselves to bash him or hit him. If you lived in Melbourne or you've worked in the industry, you know not to hit Mark Udorovic. And these guys paid the fucking price. The security firm that was running Billboard at the time was arguably one of the heaviest security firms there was, definitely in Victoria at the time, if not top fucking 2 or 3. They took those army dudes out the back. They sorted them out, not for a couple of minutes, not just for a hiding, for a long while. So that's the repercussion, I guess, of fucking with an old club head like that, is that people don't take that shit lightly. That night for those boys was the true meaning of if you fuck around, you find out. And they found out. So that's the end of Russell Street and Lonsdale Club Tour, Club Chronicles, episode 3 with Mr. Danny Rance himself. There's probably more stories that I forgot to leave out, but they're the best and the ones I can remember as I'm walking around. If you would have told me 15 years ago or fucking 20 years ago when I was hanging around here off my shopperoonies, that I'll be walking around 20 years later after being a nightclub owner and working in the industry for 2 decades, walking around with a GoPro, documenting that for people to watch on YouTube, I would have said, you're fucking insane, what the fuck's a GoPro? But here I am. Never say never to anything, I guess. Guys, if you like these videos, you want me to keep doing them, please like, follow, subscribe, all that bullshit. I haven't picked the next location. You guys tell me where I should go next in Melbourne. Maybe even interstate. Maybe I'll start doing some interstate ones if people like them.